Hey everybody, welcome to week 5 of the 8-week session of Music 104. Congratulations on making it to the halfway point. It moves quickly and you are discovering that. We've lost a few along the way and that's kind of typical because this moves so fast. And so it's important that you're keeping up on everything. Can you believe that you're already halfway done with the class? So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of material, but the reason you chose to take the 8-week class is to be able to get it done in half the time. So I know that, gosh, at this point, maybe about only a third of you seem to be reading the announcements and watching the videos and all of that kind of stuff. So I may throw an extra credit question at the end of this, just sort of a free 10 points just to see who responds. And hey, any point is a good point, right? So you have made it through the British invasion. So you got through the Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks and the Who, and then you learned about the Monkees, and you learned about the British Blues Revival, and you learned about a bit about Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and all of that. And then you learned about folk music with folk rock and singer-songwriters. And what's going to happen, if you think about this thread that we've gone through from the beginning of the class, you learned about blues and jazz, and then that led us into urban blues, which led us into rhythm and blues, which led us into rock and roll as we know it in that late 50s period. We talked about that. And as we moved into the 60s, rock and roll kind of went away and things started to branch out a little bit. We talked about Elvis being this big game changer, the way that he was able to bring black audiences and white audiences together, the way that he was able to sort of mend some of the social fabric, although in some places, of course, it caused disruptions, just like we're seeing now. And so I really want you to be thinking about that, because when I ask you the questions in the reflection observations and the discussions, what I'm asking for is for you to take the material that you're learning, sort of synthesize it, absorb it, and then be able to think about how does that relate to now? That's why almost every question will then ask about, well, in today's music scene, because I want you to be able to make those observations, make those leaps, and sort of stretch and grow in that way. Because you know, you've probably heard the saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so a lot of the things that we have going on right now politically in our country were happening in the 60s. So here we are 50 years later dealing with a lot of the same issues because that's how people are. Oops, I kind of bumped this. So, that's how folks are, and it gets frustrating. And so sometimes, especially for the younger folks in the class, you may get frustrated when you hear some of us older folks talk about, this thing or that thing. And all I want to say is it's very easy to sort of dismiss the folks that have been around longer. There was that whole little okay boomer thing and all that sort of stuff. But people that have walked the planet longer tend to know more, believe it or not. And so we can see trends. We can see things happening. For many of you, this may have been your first election or second election. I remember becoming politically aware when Carter came in 1976. I was like 11 years old, but I remember being aware of that. And so I've watched us go from, Carter to Reagan to Bush to Clinton to Bush to Obama. You watch all these changes, and I want you to think about that as you're observing this class. Thinking about the music. All music happens within history, and it's a reflection of the society, for good, bad, and otherwise. Even the mindless pop that we will be drawn to is oftentimes a reaction to sort of the harsh realities of the world. I was just reading an article the other day about how saying it's okay to go back to those things that make us feel comfortable, those TV shows, those songs, those things, because the world is so chaotic right now, and in a lot of ways that we couldn't really imagine. I mean, this hasn't really been this way for 100 years. The Spanish flu was 100 years ago. And for the most part, all the people that were alive during that time aren't now, right? They're gone. So this is a whole new thing for all of us. But a lot of what I'm seeing politically, I've seen it before. I've seen these things go on. And so we hope and we pray and we work that as we move forward, small steps are taken so that we can, love each other a little more and get on a little bit better. And sometimes, though, I think that's not happening. I think a lot of social media has really put us 5 steps back, 10 steps back. Back in the day, you could have an honest conversation, with people, but now it's just yelling at each other. So why do I bring all this up? Because it relates to the music that we're studying. You learned about soul music and Motown music and the music that came about during the civil rights movement. And you had a period of time where the music influenced the movement and the movement influenced the music. And you learned about the British invasion and this American style of music, this rock and roll that was a blending of African rhythms and European harmonies came together and then became global. And the Beatles changed the game. And Dylan changed the game because all of a sudden this kind of music that was made could now be made by anybody. And you could use it not just for entertainment, but also for saying things of substance and value and great depth. And we saw that with Bob Dylan. And now we're going to move forward into this next section. And what you're going to notice is that we start to fragment. So it's hard with the camera here. So imagine that we've got this kind of line that pop music that comes through and it hits rock and roll. And then when we hit in the 60s, it just explodes, right? It goes off into all these directions. And we saw that a little bit. So folk was its own tradition. Rock came out of rhythm and blues, which is its own tradition. And then they merged in folk rock. And then we learned about the singer-songwriters that came out of that. And so what's going to happen now is we're going to start to look at genres that are influenced by other genres or blendings of other genres. And that's going to be really the history of popular music from the 60s on until now. I often make the statement, and I'll stand by it, that nothing new has been created since 1979. Everything else is some sort of variation on a theme or some combination. When you're listening to Lil Nas and what was it? I'm totally blanking on the name of the song, but it's a blending of rap and country, right? And so that's all we're seeing now is sort of these rehashes. We haven't really had anything new show up in a long time. Rap was really kind of the new thing back in 1979, and even it had predecessors that it came out of, and we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. So what we're going to learn about this week is you're going to learn about psychedelic rock, you're going to learn about country and jazz rock, and you're also going to learn about hard rock and heavy metal. So we have 3 modules this week. That means 3 modules to get to, 3 quizzes to take, and then at the end of those, you will have your typical discussion and reflection observation. So in psychedelic music, you're going to learn about the hippie movement. You're going to learn about how that scene developed out of San Francisco, and you're going to learn about Monterey pop, and you're going to learn about Woodstock, and you're going to learn about bands like the Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead and the Doors and Jimi Hendrix again, and Janis Joplin again, because they were also tied to that. And you're going to learn about the hippie movement. And I want you to be thinking as you're learning through this about, well, what good came out of the hippie movement? And what bad came out of the hippie movement? And what is still around out of that? Then you're going to learn about country rock and jazz rock. So you learned about folk rock, which is where you have the blending of folk and rock together. Country rock is what it sounds like. Basically, you have rock musicians that were embracing the influences of country music. And then with jazz rock, same thing. You may or may not have heard of the term fusion. Fusion is where you have jazz artists influenced by rock versus jazz rock, which is rock artists influenced by jazz. So you're going to learn about that. And then you're going to learn about hard rock and heavy metal. And I want you to think about, why do we differentiate them? What are the differentiations between them? When you think about where it came from out of Link Wray and Rumble and the Kinks, which is really the ground zero of hard rock and heavy metal with You Really Got Me, in terms of the fact that it was, built off of a riff, not a chord progression, that it was, using a distorted guitar sound, which they used at the time by slitting the cone of their speaker. Nowadays, we use pedals to get all these different effects. And then you get to Led Zeppelin. And Led Zeppelin, who wasn't always the most honest band in the world, but they were an incredible band. And they really, I believe, are the band that encapsulated what was hard rock and what was heavy metal. They did them both. So you're going to learn about those examples and be thinking about how they did that with songs like Rock and Roll and songs like Immigrant Song and things like that. And they were an amazing band. You got to understand that Led Zeppelin was really one of the first great supergroups. Unlike the Beatles and the Stones, which were these guys that got together, became friends, learned how to play and all of that, Led Zeppelin, they were all established musicians. And so you're dealing with an amazing group of folks that came together for an important band. And then the traditions that came out of that. And one of the things you'll notice with hard rock and heavy metal is that it truly goes global. So far we went United States, England, back to United States. Now we're kind of moving back and forth, but then you get AC/DC out of Australia and you get the Scorpions out of Germany, and things start to move all over the place. So I want you to be thinking about all of that, right? Be mindful of these styles of music. Be thinking about them. And hey, as for your assignments, please read the assignment. Make sure that you understand the assignment before you answer. Don't wait until the last minute and, think it through. If you're stuck, if you're not sure what I'm asking, please message me in Canvas and ask me. I am getting students that are not understanding the question and getting zeros on assignments. I hate to do that. Please understand that I hate to give zeros, but I need to know that you are reading the book, watching the materials. And if you do those things, if you read the book and watch the materials and you're able to put them together, and that's why I said at the beginning of the class, the book is so important, you'll understand what I'm asking. For your reflection, observation, make sure that you paste that at the topic at the top so that you see it one more time and you go, okay, I understand what is being asked of me, that you are writing at least 200 words, and it's not rambling. It's not filler words. It's not, and so anyways, it's solid stuff, because you're not guaranteed the full points. So do the work. Also, at the end of this, you have another test. At the end of this week, you have your test 2. Again, it goes by quickly. So you had 3 modules last week, you got 3 modules this week, and then you got test 2. The good news is, for those last 3 weeks, you'll have 3 weeks to get the material, and I think that they go back mostly to 2 modules per week. So this is really the thick of it right here. Don't forget you have your concert report that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So be thinking about that. If you're not sure if it counts, let me know. That list that I give you, the YouTube, is just a place to start. If there's a band that's not on there that you love and you want to watch a concert, do that. I would recommend that you don't watch a concert you've already seen and that you already know. I'm not going to know that. I just want you to stretch and grow and do those things. Okay? So that is how the week's going to go. We got the holidays coming up, but online class, things still go. You've got to learn how to negotiate your time and plan your schedules and all of that. So here's the thing. 10 points, extra credit. If you could only eat one kind of food for the rest of your life, what would it be? Mexican food? Pizza? Hamburgers? Vietnamese food? Be specific. But if that's the only kind you could eat for the rest of your life, what would you pick? Here's the catch. You have to answer by the end of the day on Thursday. I will not accept any answers after Thursday. So nothing after 11:59 Thursday night. Please reach out if you have questions. I'm here to help. I want you to do well. Other than that, have a great week, and we will talk soon. Keep an eye out for that Thursday reminder, that Sunday reminder. I do everything I can to help you keep on task, okay? Take good care, and we'll talk soon.